Chapter 5. Air Marshal Carlin tells you to go fuck yourself. Weird how the military touches so many aspects of your life. It's like the church in that way. You hate it, but it forms you. It's apparent. Mother Church and Father Military. Father might seem a bit affectionate for someone who's on record more than once as having no respect for the business of war. But I confess to being conflicted about the military. I was 4 when we got into World War II. Its memory is precious to me, a central fact of my life. The slogans, the uniforms, the newscast, the songs, the white cliffs of Dover. Don't sit under the apple tree. I'll never smile again. I can never hear them without being overwhelmed by nostalgia. Weirdly enough, the songs of war make me feel safe. Then there were bombs. I'd always had a thing about bombs, and they were a big part of my childhood. By the last year of the war, I was 8, and already riding downtown on the subway by myself, often to the Chrysler Building on 42nd Street, where the Army had a permanent display of military hardware. Jeeps, artillery pieces, a tank, uniforms, insignia, all sorts of good stuff. But the centerpiece was a huge 500-pound bomb called the Blockbuster. It sat vertically in a rack in its falling orientation, packed with explosive possibilities. I imagined the rising high-pitched whistle as it screamed to earth, perhaps from a B-17 my Uncle Tom had worked on, falling down, down, down onto the heads of those German people I'd seen in the newsreels. But what I remember most vividly is that previous visitors had scratched their names on the bomb's casing. Vito, Brooklyn. Gloria and Eddie. Sonny, USN. Anonymous, powerless people trying to associate themselves with the bomb's vast impersonal power. Why not? Everybody should try to scratch their names on the bomb of life. A few hundred yards from my house, in Columbia's Pupin Physics Labs, another bomb, the big one, began its charmed life. That same year, our own homegrown bomb was tested on a few 100,000 Japanese and came through with flying colors. We all went down to Times Square to celebrate VJ Day, the end of one war and the beginning of the next, the Cold War, which would last 10 times as long and cost 100 times as much, but which will also win. Damn, we're good at war. In due course, the time came for me to do my part in winning the Cold War, the draft. One problem with the draft in a large population like New York City was that they had so many volunteers, you often didn't get a draft notice until you were 21 or 22. That was more disruptive than getting one at 18, so guys often joined up earlier. A lot of them didn't want to be in the Army, so the chic way to get out of military service was to go into the Air Force. The Air Force seemed a pretty good deal. You could be part of a group whose job it was to go out and drop bombs on brown and yellow people, and come home, take a shower, and catch a movie. Plus, my brother was in it, and they had cool blue uniforms. Not that pukey khaki shit, and a lot of off-base privileges. The way it came down to me, the Air Force sounded a lot like a country club. But mainly, I joined the Air Force with a clear goal: using the GI Bill to train myself as a disc jockey at disc jockey school. Funny how a teenager thinks. I had it all mapped out. I'd become a disc jockey someplace, and I'd be so good in that town, I'll get famous enough to appear in a nightclub. I'll become a comedian there, and get funny enough to be a comedian on Broadway. And after that, I'll be in the movies. Piece of cake. In August 1954, in I went. My mother had to sign me in because I was only 17. My fiancée, Mary Catherine, and I went down to 39 Whitehall Street at 5 in the morning for reporting and swearing in. They put us on a bus for a 300-mile ride to Sampson Air Force Base near Rochester, New York. What's running through my head is, off we go into the wild blue yonder, and I'm on a fucking bus going into a dark hole called the Holland Tunnel. Basic training was grueling, but I was prepared. You've always got to weed out the amateur slackers and leave the field to professional, dedicated slackers like me. I volunteered for an experimental flight of 70 men used as medical subjects to track the spread of germs. We didn't live in the open base, but in our own section, in real rooms. Every so often the medics came around and swabbed our throats with long Q-tips. The first time they said, "We're trying to see if there's any colds in the outfit." Later we found out what they were really doing. They took cultures from the throats of all the men, marking what room they were in and where they slept in that room so they could track the spread of colds and viruses. So along with the swabs that went in to take stuff out, there were swabs with germs from other guys they put in. Not on the same Q-tip, but still disgusting. But we got out of a lot of duty. We did a lot of fucking off. I didn't consider flying for a moment. I had no high school diploma, so I wasn't going to be an officer or a pilot. I quickly discovered that officers were assholes anyway, the bosses and managers of the operation. I definitely didn't identify with them. I might have wanted things they could buy with their salary, but I certainly didn't want to get them that way. I was strictly GI. I gravitated to the black airmen, some of whom were from around my neighborhood in Harlem. Others came from the south side of Chicago or the Huff neighborhood in Cleveland. I had more in common with them. Jazz, R&B, stuff I could talk about. The white kids were mostly farm kids from upstate New York, Ohio, and points west. No bonding with them. At this level, your flight commander was the same rank as you. He too was going through basic training to get his one stripe. But if they'd had some military experience like the National Guard, they were made flight commander, first among equals. Same deal as the Pope. The flight commander had his own room to live in at the end of the hall. Ours was a big black guy called Dunn, with powerful shoulders, who'd been a swimmer his high school in Chicago. He was half full of shit, but he did get to choose the squad leaders, the front-rank marchers who led each column and had a little bit of clout. Don chose 2 black guys and me because I was a cool guy. A lot of basic training is sitting through classes, listening to life or death lectures like how to behave in uniform. If you're in uniform, you never push a baby carriage. If you're in uniform, you never carry an umbrella. If you're in uniform, you always take off your hat indoors. You have to salute this guy and that guy. And lectures on military history. Endless fucking battles, all of which we'd won. Don would give me off a lot of classes. I'd been selected for a more important mission. In the morning, he'd hand me a list, my orders for the day. Go down to the BX, Base Exchange, and steal these records. Don was a shrewd tactician. Being a big city kid, I was good at stealing. Being white, I was less likely to be scrutinized while browsing the racks. My skill put me in his good graces. He'd let me hang in his room, and after the other guys had lights out, I'd listen to the records I'd stolen. One day in the BX on a search and acquire mission, I spotted this one striper I could swear I'd met someplace. Then it hit me. He was from my neighborhood, and I'd scored pot from him once. He was a rank above me, almost a god. Anyone with a stripe could order you to do things, and you had to obey. Here was a real dilemma. Does the Uniform Code of Military Justice allow me to approach him or not? Does it allow me to score pot from him or not? Apparently, it allowed me to do both. I bought a $10 bag and some papers, and that night I was the hit of Don's room. Thus, we skated through basic, serving our country by smoking pot, stealing records, and giving each other colds. And they gave me a stripe for it. I turned 18 in May 1955, and having been in the service 8 or 9 months, I got to pick where I would now be based. Actually, you got to pick 3 bases, and they picked from those. I tried to get as close to home as possible. I chose Plattsburgh, New York, Columbus, Ohio, and some other SAC base in New England, at any of which I would have been able to defend sacred American freedoms like freedom of choice. Predictably, they ignored all my choices and sent me to Barksdale Air Force Base, across the Red River from Shreveport, Louisiana, which, according to my friend Jose, was the fucking armpit of the fucking nation. Every base has an NCO club and an officers club, but this was the 50s, deep south and segregated, so there was an annex in the club for black NCOs. Lesser mortals could also go there, 1, 2, and 3 stripers. That's where I began to hang out. They had radar hot dogs. The Franks had cheese injected in the center and were heated in some kind of radiation-powered oven, an early version of a microwave. Who knows how much radiation we ingested with our dogs? There was malt liquor and Carling's Black Label and a jukebox and dances and other good stuff. There was me and a lot of black guys from various squadrons. I saw another white guy in there maybe twice. I was ostracized by the mainstream white culture in the barracks as being one of them crazy white nigger-loving guys from New York City. There was a freedom to hanging with the blacks that ran counter to the structured life of the military. In one way, it was part of my training for a comedic career, picking up a looseness and directness I wouldn't have had if I'd stuck with my own kind. Plus, the music led to radio and a stint as a DJ, which in turn led to my becoming a performer. In another way, the rebelliousness ensured an impressive record of court-martials and near-court-martials. My Air Force record on stripes was this: I got 1 stripe, lost 1 stripe. Got 1 stripe, got 2 stripes. Lost 1 stripe, got 2 stripes. Lost 1 stripe, lost another stripe. I earned 6 stripes and lost 4 stripes. By the time I got out, I felt like a fucking zebra. So now my rep was starting to be, it's not just he's hanging out with these boogies, he's a fuck-up too. Then something happened that changed my life. I'm sitting in my room one night, and a guy named Mike Stanley from Mississippi comes by and says, "Hey, George, you know what I'm doing? I'm in a play. I play the boxer in Golden Boy. There's this little theater group downtown called Venture Theater, and they got other parts to fill. You'd be good at that. You're a clowny guy." So I went down and got a part in one act as the trainer and as the photographer in the next, with a different hat. But the guy who was playing Tom Moody, the fighter's manager, is Joe Monroe, morning disc jockey on KJOE, the most popular station in town. Everybody listened to KJOE, and everybody talked about it because it played Top 40 when quick format Top 40 was brand new, the hot thing. What I didn't know was that Joe Monroe was also a 50% owner of the station. So I said, "Joe, I want to be a disc jockey when I get out of the Air Force. I'd love to come down and just watch your show someday." He said, "Anytime." I go down to KJOE, and when he signs off, he says, "Take these texts, go in the studio with that glass wall and read them for me." So with my New York accent, in the Deep South, I'm reading, "Hey, Hack and Pack store is open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day." Then I read news about the Suez Canal crisis. He hires me on the spot, 60 cents an hour to do the weekend sustaining newscast. Soon I expanded. There was a 1-hour show from 12 to 1 where they didn't do the formula. They just played nice music at noontime or whatever. I got that hour, 12 to 1. The next step was he decided to cut out the 12 to 1 slot. That stuff's bullshit. We're not doing that anymore. He went to a 6 to 9, 12 to 3, 3 to 6 daily format. I got the 12 to 3 slot every day. The Air Force was incredibly pleased that I'd finally found something constructive to do. I was downtown, in a very visible position. I was not spreading venereal disease or raping people. Excellent PR for the USAF. They let me do that until they let me go. So, I do have this ambivalence. Obviously, I'm against militaries because of what militaries do, but in a way, the Air Force was a father I never had. It was an all-male entity that took care of me, gave me a room of my own, fed me, and helped me get the childhood part of me finished. It brought me to a place where I could step off into my life and career, and rejected me at just the right moment. So I want to thank the Pentagon, the Soviet Union, and the military-industrial complex from the bottom of my heart. Without them, I could never have become the man I am today.